Hello and welcome to the slides of our fourth week, Religious Zionism and Peace Building. This is a rather complicated and complex topic, as the other ones actually, but in a different way. So rather than hearing me speak, you're going to hear me read. And the first thing I would like to read you is a quote, and then we can think about it and maybe even virtually discuss it together. So this is the quote. The objective of God, when he gave the Torah to the world, was to give the world peace. Peace in a deep sense, which means peace between man and nature, inner peace, peace between human beings, peace between us and our Creator. Peace is a wonderful thing, and what irritates me most is what we have done to peace. We have transformed it into something vulgar, in a political, not authentic and threatening object. The peace of politician is a threat, because it is based on delusions, on a distorted vision of the Middle East. We have transformed the most important thing and the most spiritual in something to be afraid of. Now, this is an interview to Rabbi Yossi Klein Halevi, a representative of the NGO Rabbis for Human Rights. We will discuss this NGO in a future presentation in, I think, number 3 or number 4 for this week. And this was an interview given, or actually collected, by Cristiana Calabrese, a graduate student who wrote a great dissertation entitled, I'm translating from Italian, As the Prophets, Religious Movements for Peace in Israel and in the Occupied Palestinian Territories. Actually, most of the work, excuse me, of the words and of the research done for this topic that you will find in this presentation comes from this MA thesis, which is a really great piece of research. Let me start by saying that the topic of Orthodox religious Judaism and peace building in the context of the occupied Palestinian territories is quite sensitive and a rather difficult topic to address. If we take the year 2015, even before the knives intifada, it's I seem to recall a number of terrible incidents or murders occurred, murders of Palestinians at the hands of some Israeli settlers. So it's very, very difficult to think about Orthodox religious Judaism and peace building, especially because the image of, especially because the legacy that many of these settlers cultivate today, the legacy that they live on is that of the group called Gush Emunim, the Block of the Faithful, which was indeed a group of, we will speak about this later on, but this was a group of terrorists that was recognized as a terror group. It was established in 1975 and it was dismantled by 1984. In these 10 years, however, it managed to poison a rather porous field, which is the field of settlements and of the occupation of the Palestinian territories. Now, the groups that we are dealing with for this set of slides and for the next 3 or 4 are actually very different. We are talking about Orthodox religious Jews, and in one case we're also talking about settlers, but we are talking about individuals and organizations that do their best and actually succeed in merging two very different and apparently contradictory dimensions. That is, the religious tradition and especially the notion of the Jews as the chosen people, and the universal dimension of human rights, which clearly belongs to the whole of humanity and not to one group. So what we see is a rift, if you want, or certainly different opinions between Orthodox religious Jews for peace in Israel, and some of them as settlers living in the Palestinian territories, and Orthodox religious Jews in general. And the former accuses the latter of helping, of strengthening Jewish nationalist extremism by feeding into those religious principles that stress the primacy of the Jewish people over non-Jews. While, according to the Orthodox religious Jews and peace groups that we're going to talk about, the notion of the chosen people, for example, equals or means a greater sense of responsibility that the Jews should feel and should demonstrate, should adopt, take on their shoulders and demonstrate and feel towards the whole of humanity. And here you have, in the following words, some names of these groups that we're going to be talking about. Oz v'Shalom, Strength and Peace, Netivot Shalom, Paths of Peace, Rabbis for Human Rights, third group, and fourth, Eretz Shalom, a very novel one. So all these groups, which are the four groups that I'm going to be talking about, are convinced that the idea of the chosen people actually recalls the special mission that God has entrusted to the Jewish people. And another very strong form of criticism that these groups raise against the, let's say, Orthodox religious Jews not specially identified as a peace group is the question, the problem of the idolatry of the land of Israel. Because what the groups that we're going to analyze see is that the desire to conquer all the land of Israel as promised to God, by God to the people of Israel, and the desire to settle it at all costs has made settlers and religious Orthodox Jews forget that first of all comes the good for the people, the well-being of the people, and then the study and the observance of the Torah, of the written law. And only last comes the land. And in this respect, I would like to read for you, actually translate for you from Italian, so it will take me, I will go a little bit slowly, but an excerpt of an article published on Haaretz in 1983 by Yeshayahu Leibovitz. Leibovitz was an Orthodox Jew. I've listed a movie in 3 parts in the filmography connected to this week's material, which is called Leibovitz of Faith, Country and Man. Leibovitz was a scientist and a philosopher, and, as I mentioned, an Orthodox Jew. And since the end of the 1960s, immediately after the Six-Day War, he was strongly and fiercely and publicly opposed to the Israeli occupation of the West Bank. And he never ceased to return to state over and over again the importance of returning those territories for various reasons. So in this article published on Haaretz in 1983, entitled Gaining Land but Losing Soul, Leibovitz wrote, and I quote, "About 15 years ago, more or less 2 years after the end of the Six-Day War, when the great majority of Israelis was drunk with nationalist arrogance for the just obtained military successes, I tried to take out all my courage to express in various speeches and articles my apprehensions, fearing that the glorious victory that had led to the conquest, and in brackets, or to the liberation, end of brackets, of all the land of Eretz Israel, and in brackets, Palestine, and even of the Sinai Peninsula, would have marked at in the eyes of the future historians the beginning of the process of decline and of collapse of Israel. For me, it was evident that it is not the territories that matter, but the people that inhabit them. So this is a very, very strong point that recalls the idea of the idolatry of the land of Israel. And so these three elements, the nationalism that I've mentioned, the presumed superiority of the Jewish people out of the principle of the chosen people, and the idolatry of the land, in the view of these groups that we're going to be analyzing in this unit in this week. So these three elements are the three elements that cause the radicalization of the conflict with the Palestinian population, and make religion a source of radicalization rather than a source of peacemaking. So, according to this group, there is an urgency to anchor faith to a different set of priorities, starting from the sacrality of human life created in the image of God. And so this leads to the idea that every Jew should engage in safeguarding the dignity and the life of every single being that preserves, no matter what religion or groups he or she belongs to, the seal of God. So if you follow me to the next presentation, we'll start with the first group of Orthodox Jews for Peace. Thank you. See you soon.